Hey everyone, I'm Frank. And welcome to a brand new episode of... Hey everyone, I'm Frank.
Come at me.
Ah,
What?
I can't get used to it. Oh God.
Welcome to episode 7 of Terror Recollect. Thank you for being a part of this.
Lucky number 7.
Lucky number 7. Today we're going to be delving into the continuation of the Friday the 13th film franchise discussion. In the previous episode, a couple of weeks ago, I talked about Friday the 13th part 1 through 3. Today I'm going to be discussing what some people call the Jarvis Trilogy.
Yep.
I never called it the Jarvis Trilogy until recently because it really is the Jarvis Trilogy. Tommy Jarvis really is one of the penultimate opponents of Jason, and I'll explain as I go on. This will cover Friday the 13th part 4, which is actually called Final Chapter. The glorious VHS cover art that actually features the buck knife that doesn't come out in the movie, as well as the slash on the mask is actually on the wrong side. So there's all kinds of wrong things happening there, but I still love that cover.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think this is by far the best made Friday the 13th film. I think it's the best edited. I think it's one of the best written. I think it has some of the best cast in it. The Jason that is portrayed by Ted White is one of the more vicious Jasons, but it doesn't have the over-the-top intensity of maybe Kane Hodder's Jason, which is very, very intense, but it still carries it carries a lot of intensity for it being the human Jason. This story is basically a continuation of the events of Friday the 13th part 3. Yeah. And what happens is Jason is dead at the beginning of the movie, spoiler alert, and he's actually brought back maybe about 10 minutes into the movie. So there's actually a moment where the audience feels kind of safe, but he ends up actually coming back in a really spectacular way. The orderly named Axel is watching some girls dancing.
They're doing
like some weird thing. 80s spandex yoga or something. And it's this is a great video. And then the movie is essentially about the Jarvis family, which consists of a mom, a daughter named Trish, and the son named Tommy, played by Corey Feldman. Yep. And they have a group of visitors that are coming, not to visit them, to rent the house adjacent to them. And this is within days of the events of Friday the 13th parts 2 and 3. They all kind of happen within the same span of time. One thing I noticed is in part 2, when Jason becomes the killer for the first time, he's still kind of a sheltered, kind of a quiet, moving, more of a stalker. And then when he does kill, it's usually with an implement. It's not up close. And his aggression builds as he goes along. In part 3, he became a bit more aggressive. But when you get into Final Chapter, all of the kills are done in this very, very intense manner. There's some really, really fun stuff with some dancing that Jimmy's doing. It really feels like these kids are in for a very fun weekend. And all of a sudden, they're in Jason's territory, so Jason kind of takes over, and their goose is cooked.
Yeah, all hell breaks loose.
All hell breaks loose.
And you also have the character, the brother, who's looking to get revenge.
Yes, absolutely. There is Rob, is his name. He is the brother of Sandra, who comes out in Friday the 13th part 2, and he's basically there to hunt and kill Jason. There are a bunch of scenes that the suspense is really built up well around the area. You have these kill scenes that, courtesy of Tom Savini's makeup effects, come out fantastic. And then on top of everything, you have this family unit that you really are cheering for. one of the things I hear people say when they talk about Final Chapter is that they say it feels like a John Hughes movie that they threw a slasher into.
Yeah.
And it couldn't be more true. That's one of the things that this feels like a regular movie. When the kids are in the car on their way to go to the house, they're talking about regular stuff. Two of the guys are talking about BJ Betty. I think those are her initials, like Barbara Jean Betty.
Broke up BJ Betty, so to speak.
And, the little struggles and even just their interactions between Teddy Bear and Jimmy are very genuine, as well as the interactions of the guy who's trying to get with Sarah, as well as the boyfriend, I think it's Paul and Sam. And that's one of the things actually what sets this movie aside is really the group of kids. If you've never seen a Friday the 13th movie, go and watch Friday the 13th, the final chapter. It pretty much is self-contained too, because there's a prologue sequence which is done around a campfire scene, which shows stuff from 2 and 3, and actually leads you right up to the moment where Jason gets the axe in the forehead.
It's a big recap, yeah.
It's a big recap. So it's a very self-contained movie. Yeah. So I highly, highly recommend it. I can go on for another half an hour about Friday the 13th, the final chapter. The only other thing I will say is Trish is amazing. She is an absolute warrior. She's not afraid to take on, she's scared to death. Let me rephrase that. She's scared to death to take on Jason, who wouldn't be, but she still does it. She goes out there and she is aggressive. She's trying to protect
her brother.
She's trying to protect Tommy. They can't find their mom. The discovery of the body. She sees Rob killed right in front of her. Yeah. It's a very gruesome death too, because he literally screams the words, "Oh my God, he's killing me."
Yeah.
And I get chills just thinking about it. One of the things I will say about the ending is that it does have what ends up being somewhat of a death sentence for Jason. It's not a long one. I think they killed him in a sense where you have the opportunity for Jason to come back, but at the same time, it took him a long time to come back, and even it took him a while to get to Friday the 13th, Part 5.
Which is actually a very good time to transition, because I personally have grown to love Part 5.
Yeah.
And I'm interested.
Well, you start. What are your thoughts on Part 5?
It's not a great movie, but it's an entertaining movie.
It's incredibly entertaining. Yeah. It's a big shift in tone.
Very much, yeah.
That was the one thing I did notice when I recently kind of caught up on these to make sure I had everything together. It almost doesn't take itself seriously.
Yeah.
It's almost like Final Chapter was done. It was done so well that I don't think that they felt like maybe it was something that they wanted to compete with.
Yeah.
Plus, it takes place later on in the chronology of Friday the 13th. So.
Even Joey, yeah.
Yeah, the kid. Yeah. There's a boy named Joey who's just super over the top, and unfortunately he ends up getting picked on, which causes the death that actually triggers this whole thing.
Yeah.
But as a complete opposite, you have John Shepherd playing Tommy, who's actually playing a very traumatized version of Tommy Jarvis. There is no give in his performance. He's just exactly what you would picture someone who had to go through the end of Final Chapter. I'll let you guys watch it, or you guys probably already know. It gave such a wonderful counterbalance to this jokey tone that Tommy was still processing all the difficulty. I think he was removed from his family, obviously all these things had happened. But then you also have Demon, who's one of the kids' brothers, is Jerry Curl, black dude with a leather suit, and talks about them damn enchiladas and
ooh baby,
ooh baby, ooh baby,
ooh baby, ooh baby, ooh baby, ooh baby.
Tommy is at this mental hospital facility called Pinehurst. And it's like a retreat out in the woods, and their therapy is done in that manner. There is a death. That boy Joey, something happens to him. He basically gets axed to pieces
by another inmate.
By a fellow patient of the mental facility, and it ends up triggering a series of murders. Obviously, there are all these Jason kills, and no one knows what's happening. Everyone's like, is it Jason? We thought Jason was dead. He's been dead for a while. So kind of nobody knows what's going on. And like I think I remarked on the part 1 through 3 episode, When you are a teenager, watching a young teenager, 12, 13, 14, watching these and, horror movies of your life at the time, and you end up really falling in love with these girls. Like, your brain doesn't know that you don't know them in real life.
Yeah.
Your brain is just like, oh my God, she's gorgeous. So they become your girls for life. Violet is dancing to this 80s...
Pseudo Echo.
Yeah, it's the song His Eyes by the band Pseudo Echo. And I remember just loving that scene because there's this girl like kind of doing like 80s dance. It's not the robot. I'm doing it completely wrong. She's like, doing all these, kind of dance moves. And then here comes Jason or this Jason character. It almost looks like he's ready to do something bad just by standing there and then, go ahead and, the kill scene itself isn't the best part. It's actually the build-up.
Yeah.
The build-up to that kill scene, I think, is one of the best. And then, of course, you have the main female heroine survivor, which is Pam. I've always loved Pam. I always felt like she was an underrated final girl. Mm-hmm. And there's a scene that takes place in the rain as her and Reggie are trying to flee from this Jason character. A very wet shirt that she's wearing in the rain, running around. And I think that's the one thing that this movie does very well is that it's not ashamed to be what it is.
Yeah.
Which is an over-the-top, doesn't take itself seriously, nudity and gore fest.
And because it doesn't take itself seriously, that's why it's so enjoyable, because
absolutely
you don't take it so seriously. So you're welcoming all the silliness, and it's appropriate.
Absolutely, very, very appropriate. And one of the things that's very cool about it as well is, I guess I'll just go ahead and say it, all spoilers removed. It's not Jason. For those who didn't know, I mean, the movie was released like 30 years ago. It's not Jason. It's the first time, other than Friday the 13th Part 1, where it was his mother, or there's no Jason in the movie. There's some flashbacks to like a Jason character, but there's no Jason in the movie.
The actual killer in this movie.
The actual killer is Roy, the ambulance driver. I feel like I'm shocking some of you as I'm saying this right now. I'm sorry. Yeah. It's
ambulance
Roy,
driver.
The ambulance driver.
You don't say.
I do say.
Wow.
Believe it or not, it was Roy, the ambulance driver.
The father of
Joey.
Joey.
The father of Joey who
snapped
and used the whole Jason thing as the excuse to go out and exact vengeance, which good for him. I mean, why are people chopping up his son? Then again, he killed a lot of innocent people, so I don't know. But he got his due at the end. He was impaled on like a bed of spikes.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are pretty much my thoughts on Friday the 13th. Part 5, A New Beginning. I actually like the fact that it's called A New Beginning. I always love the artwork. I think we talked about that in episode 1.
Yeah.
Where it's the hockey mask that doesn't appear in the movie with the red eyes. And this will actually be a good way to transition us to Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives. You get this different version of Jason, which I've heard the term zombie Jason. I kind of use it, but I think that was, Kane Hodder's Part 8 Jason was my first introduction. I think I mentioned that in the first episode. So that's the only Jason I really knew. So the other ones were kind of the surprise to me. The less aggressive human Jasons. But yeah, for lack of a better term, he's zombie Jason. He's literally resurrected in a very...
From lightning...
Frankenstein type of intro where Tommy unearths him in order to want to cremate the body.
To get closure,
To get closure. I don't know why he wasn't cremated in the first place.
Right.
And why they took the time to bury him. I don't know. But anyway, he impales him with this rusty fence post made of metal. And right before he's about to light the match to cremate him, or, a bolt of lightning brings him back. Very Frankenstein, as the director, Tom McLaughlin. Big black and white monster movie fan. Did that as a tribute to the Frankenstein movies. So he's brought back in that manner. And like you said, he's way more unstoppable now. So his kills are way more aggressive.
His strength is like amped up to like 1,000 in this movie. So.
And that's where I've come up with my personal theory that every time Jason is killed, killed, he comes back way more aggressive. There's never any regression. Like, well, let me, take it easy now. No, it's like, so this is the first movie, a Friday the 13th movie. I'll give you a quick synopsis. So this is years later. They are reopening the camp under a different name called Camp Forest Green. I really wish they would have shown a scene where the mayor dubbed the city, "This is Lake Forest Green," instead of Crystal Lake, so we can move forward. I kind of wish they would have done that, but I understand why they didn't. So there's a new group of counselors that are coming to run this new summer camp. So this is actually the first time since maybe the prologue in the first Friday the 13th that there are actually kids at the summer camp.
Yeah.
And this actually features one of my favorite Friday the 13th girls of all time. Probably the number one, which is Megan.
Yeah. The sheriff's daughter.
The sheriff's daughter. Oh my God. Even when I was rewatching, I'm like, I watched that movie for the first time. I was probably 12 or 13, and I'm the age I am now. We'll just put it that way. Lots of years later. And I'm like, she's still my favorite. Yeah. I love her. Everything about Megan. Anyway, I can go on. But so she's one of those camp counselors that's there to run the camp. Her father is the sheriff. Tommy ends up in the arms of the sheriff, not in that way, but because he's running away from Jason. So he spends the whole movie trying to convince everyone that Jason's alive. The sheriff doesn't believe him, but all these other killings taking place. One of the things that really stuck out in mind when I was watching this recently was it really is way funnier. There are the scenes of the paintballers and just the interaction between two of them. They're like executives out on a paintballing trip, and one is like, this isn't war, this is war, it takes dedication, and the other guy's like, I want a sandwich.
I'm hungry, I want to get a sandwich.
Or like, this is the first time I really ever saw how much humor is really in it, or even little things that people say, and it ended up endearing me a lot more to the movie. It's definitely in my top 5 favorite Fridays of all time.
And we actually met one of the paintballers, Anne Ryerson.
Anne Ryerson, and she was actually very blown away.
Oh, yeah.
I may even insert that clip because I still have it. It's a video clip of her saying, "This guy knows my lines from Friday the 13th better than I know them because I don't know them anymore, and he knows all of them." And that was at Son of Monsterpalooza.
She wasn't there signing. She was just walking around.
And she said her husband had a booth there.
Yeah.
So she was there, I guess, to support her husband. But that was a lot of fun. I'm really glad you brought that up.
Let's go.
I am very impressed that this young man knows all my lines from Friday the 13th, part 6. And I don't even know them. Next one.
Thank you.
This is my personal favorite in the franchise.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Tell me what you think about Friday the 13th, part 6.
Like you said, in each movie, every time he gets killed, I mean, no, part 5 wasn't Jason, but after a final chapter, this is the first zombified Jason, correct?
Yeah.
And his kills in this one are even more hyped up.
Absolutely.
Amped up. Yeah.
Absolutely. Because you go from a human, aggressive Jason, Ted White's in final chapter. He's still bound by human limitations to a certain degree because Trish chops him up pretty bad in the end. And then you have someone who's not Jason, so we don't really have a comparison there. And then it goes a step beyond that where now there's kills in this movie where he's bending people backwards or bending them in half, and twisting a girl's head basically completely off.
And this is the first time I believe he crushes somebody's head, right? With the
it's one of the cops, one of the deputies.
Okay.
Either way, moving on. We're gonna watch a movie. Yeah. Sorry.